Hello, hello, hello. Just gonna do a quick mic check here just to make sure that I can hear myself. Sounds good. Yeah, we got sound. Alright. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Pixels.Cafe podcast. Um, Here on the Pixels.Cafe, we like to play things by ear, to be honest. When I say we, I mean me. I should probably get out of the habit of doing that, I guess. One of the things that I kind of want to do on this channel is do a little bit of a development blog for a game engine that I'm working on. Keep your expectations low. It's my first game engine. And I am also planning to build a game around the engine, not just the engine itself. But my goal is to kind of make it more of a community project eventually. Open it up to the community, hopefully get some feedback, hopefully get some help and contributors, and just kind of create a small little mini game community built around the system. It certainly isn't trying to compete with anything professional like Godot or anything. It's more so trying to compete in the space of perhaps RPG Maker. Even that is a little bit at a higher standard than what I'm going to be able to get out, at least for a first iteration. But that's kind of the area. It's more like those micro retro consoles that you see more and more online. Things like the retro 8-bit Pico game console, even things like NES emulators or NES editors. It's designed around simpler games. It's not designed around 2D though, so it isn't going to be focused around a game like Mario, Super Mario Bros. Or anything like that. It's not a 2D side scroller. Although there's no reason you couldn't build a 2D side scroller using the engine. It's just not designed for 2D, so it'd be like a pseudo 2D. It'd be a 3D world, and then you just do like a 2D platformer. Definitely doable in the system. That actually might be something I look into, to be honest, as one of the first sample games that I kind of released for the community to look at and build from. Now that I think about it, because that would actually be really simple, and I wouldn't have to build anything much more than like one level in theory, to give an example. So, yeah, that's something I might do. As you can see, it's very off the cuff. I don't really have anything planned for today. However, for the other side of this channel, I want to kind of just talk about some of the gaming culture, some of the consoles that I grew up on. Which was mainly Generation 5 and 6 and 7. And then I've kind of followed along, Generation 8. It was kind of the last one I touched. I've really stayed hands off of like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and all that. So I haven't been, following as tightly as, say, a lot of the other content creators in the space. However, I come in with kind of a perspective of someone who used to really like gaming, especially when I was young, like from the age of 6 to 18. I played games pretty much more than any other hobby that I had, whether that was playing couch co-op, playing solo, playing with my family, like even like my mom, would occasionally play on the N64 back in the day, going over to friends' places, and then when online gaming came out, at first it was just kind of like going online, playing some games like that. For me, it was mostly PC games like StarCraft, Diablo 2. That's where I was mostly playing online. Early, and then with the shift to console support on the PS2, and the Xbox already kind of came with it baked in, there was a lot of opportunity there to explore the early gaming online. And there was no pay to play. Well, I mean, technically, if you're on Xbox, you had Xbox Live subscriptions. I wasn't on Xbox, so I had the PlayStation system. And generally speaking, I always thought it was superior because it didn't charge you anything. Of course, that's changed now in both systems. You have to pay for it. But back in the day, it was something that I really enjoyed about the PlayStation 2, was that you could go online, play some of these games, especially like the Battlefield games. And while you weren't able to get the 32 players in a match, you were able to sometimes get up to 16. And often it was just 8 or 12 a lot of the times. And frankly, I didn't mind that too much back in the day. On a PlayStation 2, it wasn't too big of a deal. You didn't expect 30 people in a match. And frankly, waiting for a lobby to fill up all the time to 30 people on the Xbox was kind of a pain, and you would typically see people drop out anyways, and would go quickly down to like 30 or 28 people in a match. So it didn't really matter that Sport 32. It was rare to see a full game go all that way at the time, but having a solid 8 persons was not hard to get, and so you could almost always get a basic 4v4 and then a little bit more. And you got to remember that with that in mind, the maps weren't big. It wasn't like you were hunting around for minutes on a time before you even saw somebody. The maps were a lot more representative of the size of the actual battle. So if there was 8 people in the match, 4v4, the maps accommodated that in both their design as well as their size. And so I found that personally, even though they were smaller matches, they felt faster paced, and they tended to feel easy to form, easy to get in, and you didn't feel overwhelmed, and victory still felt satisfying. Like if you had a nice run and you were just, owning that round, just, not being able to get taken down, just getting headshots and getting your kill count way up there, it felt good, even if it wasn't against, 30 people. So I think there was something to be said about those older online experiences, especially the free ones. And the lack of DLC was never a shortcoming, in my opinion, because one, at the time you didn't really think about it. The PCs had extensions and expansion packs and stuff, but even DLC itself was not that popular on the PC side of things. There were some games that kind of went down that road, but it was pretty rare, to be honest, at the time. What I found instead was that a lot of the games were more so, what's the word, focused around hidden content that was bundled in, but not necessarily expressly told. So for example, you would typically have secret missions, side quests, hidden items, hidden areas, hidden bosses, little Easter eggs, developer menus, cheat codes. All these kinds of things would be baked into the game from the get-go, but they wouldn't necessarily tell people about them. They would usually tell a few publications that they'd partnered with to get exclusive deals, and then you would have sort of an offshoot market that would support these secrets through things like guidebooks, magazines, tell-alls, cheat code books, cheat code systems, and it kind of incentivized I don't know, digging into the game a bit more. So you didn't just assume the game was surface level. Whereas today I find whenever I get a game, right off the bat, I'm already seeing holes in it. Like sometimes it's right in the main menu. There'll be like a section that is off limits to me. But they're blatantly saying, hey, if you buy this DLC, you can have this available to you. And it has irked me since the dawn of it. Since the very first time this started to show up, it's annoyed me. And it's pushed me further and further and further away from the industry, to the point where I haven't bought any of the recent consoles. I have no interest in buying them because they have just continued down that road. Whereas older games don't have those terrible flaws. It just was a different time, a different moral ground. And when you go back to those games, even if they have bugs in them, they're typically minor. There are some game-breaking things that can come up once in a while, but over my entire life, I think I had that happen to me maybe 2 or 3 times. And it was a very rare occurrence. And honestly, most of the time it came from me. Well, one of the times it came, I think, from me messing around with the game save file and trying to apply cheat codes. So that was probably on me. Another time it was definitely a bug, and it sucked. I got stuck, and I had to essentially restart. I can't remember what the game was, and I can't even remember if I restarted, because I'm sure that if it was far enough into the game, I probably wouldn't have, knowing me. I would have gone on to something else. But it's, I don't know, it's not in my memory, so it obviously wasn't that big of a deal for me. But I do know it has happened. I just can't recall any specific instances of it. Ultimately, though, I think gaming was better, just plain and simple, back in the day. Like, I was looking at my PlayStation 2 collection, and it is far from where I want it to be. Of course, I'm not an avid collector. I don't go out of my way to be like a completionist by any means. I'm actually quite a picky collector. The games that I have are games that I played and liked as a kid, or were games that I wasn't able to play as a kid and I wanted to play them eventually, or games that I rented and I never actually owned, or my friends had and I never actually owned, but I played, and so those are all the games that I've collected. They're not because they're the rarest, although I do have actually quite a number of rare and valuable titles. But the reason I have them isn't because they're rare and valuable, it's because I actually enjoyed them. Like Futurama, for example, on PS2. I rented that game a number of times from my local video game store and rental place. And it was a great game. I mean, it was very basic by all means, but I was such a big Futurama fan that playing that game back then was awesome. I loved seeing how they'd redone all the different places, all the different worlds and references. I loved seeing the cel-shaded style. Still to this day, that is my favorite kind of animation style in video games. So to see it applied, especially in a cartoon where it makes sense, has always been something I liked. And I didn't mind that it might have been a little clunky, because again, it was a game that had lots of references, and it had Easter eggs in hidden areas. If I recall correctly, there was a hidden room in the main area, like their main office, like with the spaceship and all that. And I think you had to like bang on a locker for a ridiculous number of times, like hundreds of times or something. And then it would finally open up, and then once the locker opened, you could then go and do something like hop through a wall or what have you. And then there was like this just hidden Easter egg room off to the side. And I just think, like, it wasn't super meaningful, but it was fun. Or, for example, it was either God of War 1 or God of War 2. I can't remember. I think it was God of War 1. At the very end of the game, after you beat Ares, you end up in his kind of his throne room area. And there's a number of statues all over the place. And there's this one statue, I think it's of a minotaur, or perhaps it's Ares himself, actually. It might actually be Ares himself now that I think about it. And I remember I was playing with my friend, and we just had a tendency to, at the time, because we knew that there was usually Easter eggs in these games, we would typically kind of play to check things out, right? Like, oh, there's a hallway down there, it seems empty. Let's go, like, just hit the wall at the back, or let's see if there's, like, anything that we can interact with. And that was kind of the way that we would typically approach our games. But I remember we just beaten Ares, and they had this last little section that you could kind of walk around. And I remember we were kind of walking around, checking it out, hitting things, breaking stuff, seeing if there were, like, how many orbs there were, seeing if we could power up, you know, all of our skills to max and what have you. And then we realized that there was this big Ares statue that sounded like it could break. It had the sound. Like, all the breakable things had a particular kind of a hollow thud to them. When you hit non-breakable things, they had more of like a ting sound, not so much of a hollow thud. And me and my friend just heard this and we're like, it's gotta be breakable. Let's try and break it. And I think we spent like 5 minutes, or maybe even more than that, just constantly applying these attacks over and over and over and over. And we were literally about to give up. We were like, you know, it might not actually be breakable. And because it had been minutes of us just like hitting this thing. And then it finally broke. And when it finally broke, both me and my friend, we just looked at each other like, oh, it actually did. It did. It was a secret. And it gave, I forget if it gave us like an object or if just a message popped up. But I remember there was a bunch of orbs. And we get the orbs, and then somehow you get this scroll or this message, but it essentially tells you to call a phone number. And so we call this 1-800 phone number, and on it is this recording from the voice actor of Kratos, and he's essentially telling you he's going to find you, where did you get this number, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like a little hidden Easter egg, but it was fun and memorable to find. To this day, I still remember finding that Easter egg and other Easter eggs in a number of games, and most of them were in the PlayStation 2 era, if not PlayStation 2 exclusives. So that, to me, is just something we've lost with DLC, because it seems like companies can't even give us a full game anymore without wanting to nickel and dime us, charge us for every little thing that they choose, by the way, whether they want to put into a game or not. So it's not like, you know, they're noble when they do this. Especially not day one DLC. Anything that's released on day one is ignoble. It is completely antithetical to a moral game developer. It is literally a company telling you, oh, you like this game? Well, suck it. Then pay us and show us how much you like it. Lick my toes. That's pretty much what they're saying when they give a DLC out on day one, or anything, frankly, within like a month or two. I think, honestly, if there isn't a serious development cycle that goes into that DLC, if there's an actual content being built post-release, then you shouldn't be charging us more money for it. It should be in the price of the game that we pay for, like, and that you're supposed to, like, build into the price. You should, like, doing all this stupid bullshit so that you can try and eke out extra dollars, it's disgusting, frankly. And it's pushed me away from the entire industry. Like I said, like, they think they might get more money, and I'm sure there are lots of people that do buy things. But they're slowly corroding and eroding away at their foundational fan base, right, by these kinds of things. Like, there's so much money that I would have spent if they had managed to keep me interested. And it wasn't because, you know, I've outgrown gaming in some way or what have you, which is, you know, you hear that sometimes, and it certainly can happen. I definitely don't have as much time for games, and I think that's the thing. I don't have as much time anymore, but I want to still enjoy it. However, my time is now so much more valuable that the game has to be even more valuable than it used to be. And I used to be a pretty picky gamer, but I was always satisfied with the games that I picked because of that. You know, I rarely had excess games in my collection that I didn't actually enjoy playing because I was quite picky. And if I wasn't sure about a game, I'd rent it first before actually committing. And a lot of the times, if the game wasn't even worth owning, i.e., if I could beat the game in one renting sitting and there wasn't enough content there, then I didn't buy the game often. Now I've maybe gone back and picked up some of those games from my collection now, in the past, or in the future since then, but that's almost for a different reason. That is a lot of it tied to nostalgia, and a lot of it tied to the fact that modern games are not fulfilling that need, either by design or just ignorance. I think it's by design. It's kind of clear as day that it's by design. I mean, there might be apologists out there that are still defending these companies. I know there's journalists, but their jobs depend on it, so I don't really take whatever they say for any real meaning. I think that the real problem is that companies aren't even run by passionate people anymore. There's a creative element, a spirit that is found in all artistic mediums. And if you don't have that creative spirit in you, it's really, really hard, if not impossible, to actually create something of profound significance to anyone, let alone yourself or like an entire audience of people around the globe. Like, it's hard enough just to please yourself, and then you're gonna try and please someone else, and then do that a million times over, multiple millions of times. It's a skill. The only people that are capable of doing it are people that are passionate, that are doing it because their vision is the only way it can be done. They cannot, negotiate around the core fundamentals, the core foundation of what it is they want to bring to the table. And it doesn't matter what a boardroom of people say. If a boardroom of people come in and change and distort this vision, it doesn't matter who's leading the vision. It's been eroded and eaten out. The board members often, these committees, anytime you get a group of people making decisions on an artistic project, it usually kind of falls to the side. Now, they might be able to make decisions on an aspect that they are tasked with, and there are certain elements, for example, that team coordination is very effective. For example, the writing room. You might not have a one writer, right? That's a lot of work to have one writer write everything, and it might actually lead to a problem of the same tone showing up all over and sounding like the same writer. And if you're writing dialogue, for example, you'll want various tones. So having different writers write dialogue is a very good situation, because you want to bring different perspectives to the dialogue at play. You do not want one vision actually dictating the words, right? However, you don't want the writers going completely off the rails and just, losing their mind, or getting, the latest, I don't know, woke inspiration. Oof. Anyways, I don't know what that was. But that's the problem. If you give too much freedom and you hire people who aren't aligned around the core vision. So the writers, yeah, you can have different writers, but they should not be given creative control over every little thing, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So then you got to go up one level above them. You need somebody, at least, to be managing the writers. And frankly, you need somebody to be managing all the different groups. So you have, at the head, some sort of creative leader, right? Usually the creative lead, creative director, and that person needs, above all else, to have vision. Delegation is probably then the second. Well, delegation and communication, hand in hand, would then probably be the next most important skill set. And then after that, managerial things, right? You need some sort of administrative duties, or capacity at least to, work in an administrative environment. So, to me, those three skills are paramount, but the number one is a vision. If you don't have the vision, if you are just there because the corporate board likes you, if you're just there so that you can, move your way into some sort of executive position or something, and you're not actually interested in the game, you have no business whatsoever going near that position. You should be delegated all your duties because you don't have the creativity needed to actually create something of any true value. So it doesn't matter that you have all those aspirations for managerial success, executive power, and what have you in the ivory tower that you aspire to. It doesn't really matter because you're not going to get there. I mean, maybe you could fail forward, but that just probably means that you'll fail forward regardless of whether you worked on this project or anything else. So why are you ruining a perfectly good project so that you can fail forward out of, I don't know, just sheer narcissism? Instead of, I don't know, doing it like everybody else. Being a good-for-nothing lawyer or just weaseling your way into the boardroom through, networking like every other corporate stooge. There are ways to do this without destroying the art at the foundation of the entire industry. But no. You guys are just going out there destroying things so that you can get your paychecks and your bonuses and have your quarterly reports. Games should not care about quarterly reports till post-release. If, the game needs to have a budget. The budget has to be defined, well understood, articulated, and planned for. Then you've got to be frugal with your marketing until you have something to market. You have to be careful with, the amount of lead-up time. You don't want to get too many developers on board until you know what you're building. So you want to have your core development team. And then you want to be able to scale up. So then, yeah, you maybe need some sort of talent support to help scale that process so you can ramp up quickly. But if you ramp up too quickly because you don't actually have an efficient plan or you don't know how to ramp up to an existing plan, you just only know how to ramp up 1,000 developers at the same time, then no wonder your budgets are going to be completely screwed because you have 1,000 developers from day one to day whatever, 5,000. Instead of what used to be 20 developers for 1,000 days. It's I don't know. They talk about all these books on leadership. There's probably more books that have been written about leadership in the last decade than were probably written about leadership prior. And yet at the same time, and not to mention all the content, the videos, everything. And all the content that's come and gone. There's so much digital content that is come and is no longer available, but was available and was consumed. And it's even when you take that into account, it's even more shameful that we're watching this parasitic mind virus, not just woke stuff, which you do see, all the politics bleeding into every genre of game imaginable. Look, if you want to put politics into a game, let me make some suggestions. If you want to do LGBTQ kind of stuff, why not focus around dating simulators or something? I don't know. Build out a game around that concept if you really want to shoehorn that stuff in, where it maybe makes sense, like in a dating simulator where you actually, I don't know, have sexual orientations and genders and pronouns and all these other things where it makes sense. Put it there. You know where it doesn't make sense? In a fantastical medieval like realm with monsters and mythical creatures. Yeah, it doesn't make sense there. Don't put it in there. It really doesn't make sense. I mean, lots of really good developers have said it, and I'm gonna say it, and a lot of content creators have said it. We have an expectation when we play a game, especially if it's anything to do with science fiction, fantasy, or history. we 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 expect, nay, demand that it does not contain references that are context breaking or tied 100% into daily politics. No one cares. In fact, we hate it. It's not that we don't even care. It's not like I mean, people now are apathetic because they're turning away and they're not even buying the products anymore. They're not even looking anymore. They don't even want to, like, the smell is making them nauseous and they're leaving the vicinity completely. These are the things that we are seeing happening in the gaming space. Like, games are not breaking even, or they're just breaking even, and they have massively inflated budgets that could have developed, like, sometimes 20 games with that budget that probably would have had more successes amongst them than the failures that would probably also inevitably have been in there. But all told, you probably wouldn't have had such a big failure, across the aggregate. And it's like this focus on ultra realism is not very immersive because it makes you think. Let's say, God help you, it actually looks ultra realistic, like truly real one day, right? Then the only things that we want to see that in are things that we can imagine doing in real life ourselves. Do you understand that, developers and terrible designers and woke people out there that don't seem to realize this? Like, one of the reasons old games are so fun, and I love old games, is because there's a certain level of caricature to things. It's not ultra realistic. There is a certain amount of dispelling of disbelief that you have to do. You kind of have to, use your imagination. And when you use your imagination, it uses different parts of your brain than if you're watching something that's ultra realistic. Like, when I think of the games that have tried to be ultra realistic, the only ones that, in my opinion, have ever worked are military shooters, sports games, and, racing or some sort of, like, technology thing where it's like a simulator of some kind, racing simulator, whatever. Those ones tend to work out really well when they're ultra realistic. And funny enough, those ones tend to be the area where I think that gaming bleeds into training, right? Like, simulators and gaming cross over, and I think you actually get into industrial applications, business applications, non-recreational applications on that same boundary. So I can clearly see why there's heavy investment in this space without it being, say, above board. Like, it's clear as mud that that these companies are pseudo investing in one industry while actually funneling money into another industry, right? Like, they're funneling money into the gaming industry in a really inefficient way. If we're looking at it from a gaming perspective, right? Like, if the goal of this is to make games that lots of people enjoy, that are commercially successful, they're not doing that. They're not doing that at all. They hit it some of the time, but they miss a lot of the time. And I mean, they're taking big risks, so those misses are meaningful. So there's that. But then on top of that, the other, at least to me, the other aspect is that these companies have gotten so big now. Like they're they're all owned by, like, you know, each other essentially, but they're essentially monopolistic in a lot of ways. Like, unless you're an indie developer, you're probably owned by a company like Microsoft or you know, like that's essentially where things are going. Sony or Microsoft owns you, maybe Nintendo owns you, right? Like, there's not many players. When you actually go up and you look at all the shareholders and stuff, the people that are actually profiting off this, it's a slice, because they're so big that they're at the global international market level, that they have diversified their holdings so much, you know, like, and they've lost some of these diversified holdings, right? And they've sold things off over the years. Like, think of Sony, right? Like, they had televisions, they sold things off, blah, 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 blah. And, like, there was different kinds of acquisitions and mergers over the years of different stacks of technology. But a lot of these companies in video gaming have huge vested interests in industrial applications, far beyond the consumer level, right? Like, even take, say, for example, a camera, right? Like, if you look at Sony makes cameras, right? They sell camera equipment, and they sell a range of cameras that go from, say, you know, $500 all the way up to, say, $50,000. Maybe even $100,000, I don't know. They probably even have more expensive cameras than that. I wouldn't be surprised. They have very expensive professional equipment, right? Because of their movie making ventures and stuff. And they sell a lot of this equipment to other studios as well. So they own studios, they own manufacturing. They're involved at one point in computers, right? They do chip development, obviously, and stuff like that. Or and then they work with other partners like Samsung and stuff for a variety of different things as well. But, like, these companies are so big that it's not like all their money's in gaming, right? So I personally think that the big push for hyper-realistic games and all this, like, really high-intensity processing is not really because they care about making gaming that intense, that amazing, that realistic. I think it's because they are trying to simultaneously develop one branch over here that's industrial applications, and then they're essentially subsidizing the development of that through their video games. And because story and gameplay and, you know, care and consideration of the underlying art doesn't really align with their other business ventures, I think a lot of these companies are just secretly spending money on things that they're gonna sell through their various subsidiaries and license, and I don't think it's about the games. So I think one of the things that we have to do is recognize that these big companies are not really in it for gaming anymore. I think they're in it for something else. I think they're in it for either control, consumption, engagement metrics, so maybe they've just become social media, or they're in it to essentially diversify and offload while also vertically integrate their other industries. Like AI, VR, just a lot of money there, and a lot of these companies are vested in that. So I won't be surprised if that money is a little hard to resist while it's still there, right? Whereas the starving artist, the person that has the desire to, say, make a fantastical world unlike anything that's ever been done, or to craft a new magical system that really empowers the gameplay element in a way that is, innovative, while simultaneously building on the world and the lore and the backstory and having a fantastical kingdom or realm or something. I just don't think that's a business interest for these companies. And so I don't think we should even look to them or suggest to them that they do this. I think we should just turn away from them completely. And if you want to remember what they used to be like, go and play the PS2, PS3. Heck, the PS4 they were still making good games for, right? They didn't really die on this hill until the end of the PS4 and the conversion to the PS5, in my opinion. And Xbox, in my humble opinion, was dying a little bit faster. Xbox has always been on the forefront of subscriptions, so they're just gonna bleed you dry one way or another. I'm not a fan of Xbox, never was a big fan of Xbox, although I did like some of their exclusives. I did like Halo. I thought Fable was great. They had a number of cool exclusives, especially on the original Xbox. And even the Xbox 360 had some really cool exclusive content. Not to mention that a lot of things were optimized really nicely in the Xbox 360. So it was a good console. Like, if I were to go to Xbox, I would suggest Xbox 360 and the Xbox original if you're going to do any kind of collections, because I think those systems still have some value to them. Of course, online doesn't really matter for older consoles anyways these days, but yeah, I think those consoles still have some value to them. I don't think anything after the Xbox 360, in my opinion, has value. And obviously that's a controversial statement, but that's where I stand. I even struggle with the PS5. It's clearly it's one of the best-selling consoles of all time. But I think that's because it's just not the worst. It's not terrible. It suggested the old way still, right? Like, there was a certain amount of backwards compatibility that PlayStation has kind of had in their DNA for a while now, especially with their support even on their PSN network. I think they survived largely because they have supported the retro games more and more and more through this iteration of digital only, because retro games are quite small by today's standards, so you can download a bunch of them before you could even download an update on a modern game. So in terms of accessibility, they're very accessible. Making them available online or through some sort of subscription allows people to touch that nostalgia easily. But I don't think having a PlayStation 5 is going to make people spend $70 to $100 on a new game just because they bought a console, when there's all this good quality content. And if they think they can get rid of the good quality digital content to force people to buy these $70, $100 games, I think they will see it bite them in the ass. I think people will say, screw this. No, don't take away these good games. I'm going to go emulate them. I'm just going to go back to my old ways, back to the second-hand stores. Like, for me, I personally think that the best way is to have that physical disc on your shelf, even if you play it on an emulator, even if you play it on the PlayStation 4, or the PlayStation 5, or the Xbox Game Pass, or Steam Deck, or whatever. I think the best way that you should have it is in the original format, physically on your shelf, because it either is taking up too much space on your shelf, in which case it's not important, or and that's a reason, like, if you don't have the space, I guess. But I personally think that, like, there's just going to come a time when you're going to wish you had that physical copy, because it's happened time and time again so far. It happened with Netflix, it happened with Disney Plus, it happened with PlayStation games, it's happened with certain content being re-edited or omitted or censored or something. There's some old hacks that were just like, they were cut out, and so while you may be able to find that on an emulator, still. Officially, you won't be able to find it. And so downloading it, say, to these official channels, I don't think is going to give you that original experience. However, that being said, if you're going to play an emulator, you can do some cool things, such as apply different filters, do up-resing, which I like. Additionally, there are things such as screen recording and all that, which can be done nicely. But the other thing that I found is that the only time that I like to purchase the old games on the new console is if they've at least done an HD update. If it's in HD, that to me, and it's not worth $20. It's worth 15 or less, depending on the game, right? Top quality shelf game, 15 bucks. Regular good quality game, 10 bucks. Medium low quality game, $5, right? But if you do an HD update, even if nothing else has changed, and it's just widescreen, you know, no stretching, obviously, but that is, to me, the minimal thing that they can do that I would go and purchase for, because sometimes that extra widescreen experience is nice. When they do a real remaster, though, that's definitely worth some money. Again, not always as much as they want to try and charge, but I would say on a quality remaster where they've actually redone assets, they've redone features, they've made it the best version of the game that they can. So if they've had multiple releases or disparities between regions, where one region got something that another region didn't get, they've merged it so that both regions get the maximal amount of content. I've always been a fan of that. And I think that's worth spending money for as well. So when games get re-released with extra content, remasters, or HD upgrades, I think that's worth spending some money on. And I think the convenience factor is worth it. But I don't lie to myself. If those come out on physical, I'm going to get them on physical too. Because they're better on physical. Because I'm not going to lie to myself. I know Sony's going to steal my stuff one day under some stupid license agreement. I know that Nintendo's store, because they already did it with their DS store, they're going to do it with their Switch store one day. So anything you've bought on Switch, if you don't have it installed and it doesn't require an internet connection and require some weird licensing thing on the store, then it's going to disappear one day. And I know that. And until there's literal legal changes that forbid this from happening, which is unlikely to come about, you gotta have your backups, and your best backup is a physical backup. Then it's a digital backup, you know, find a nice torrent, and then it's that backup, you know, on the console, maybe. You know, that's the third option, because it's the least trustworthy out of all of them. You know, you're literally like, it's the least trustworthy. You know, it's like, imagine Sony comes down and like you just get like dazed in a moment, and everything changes. I must buy subscription only content. I must buy subscriptions. I cannot own things. Don't have property. Must be permasurf. Sony, Xbox and Microsoft, Nintendo tell me this. Apple tells me this. They all tell me this. Google whispers in my ear. You will be found to be a slave. That's literally how I feel about this sometimes. It's like, what delusional god is speaking to these people? What what has gripped these people and turned them into slaves? Or worse, turn them into people that want to convert other people into slaves. I'll tell you what these people are. Weak. They're weak people. They're kind of sad people. I'm sure you've seen them if you've ever worked in a large enough organization, but you come across some people that just exude weakness. And not in a good way. You know, not like because they have some sort of ailment or infirmity. No, 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 no. Their spirit is weak through neglect. These are people that typically just are slobby. You know, they might look put together. They might have a nice house and all that, but their work ethic is slobby. When you ask them to do things, they frequently will put them off. They'll frequently delay. The turnaround time will be, 2 or 3 times that of anyone else. They'll always have excuses. They'll always, like, I don't know. They'll do. There's this like pattern that you see in people like that, where it's worked for them in the past, so they kind of keep doing it, and it just depends on whether you're going to call them out or not. And it goes like this. They're expected to give an update, say, on the meeting, right? And maybe they've had a week notice to prep this. So along comes the day. They don't have anything prepared. Most people would be at least somewhat stressed that they have nothing prepared, right? Because, oh crap, I have nothing prepared. Oh my god. And most people would say, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. I got nothing prepared. Can we postpone this till next week? Or postpone it to tomorrow, or whatever, right? And I'll get this sorted out. The slobby people, though, they do not do this. The slobby people walk into that meeting knowing 100% that they didn't do any of the work. And they don't care. They're not going to take fault for it, either. Because they're not at fault. It's not their fault they didn't do anything. It was an unreasonable ask. No one could have got that work done. Obviously, it's not going to be done. But I'm going to play this fake game and pretend that I could have done it. And now I'm going to explain to them in this meeting when I was supposed to be demoing the work. Instead, I'm going to take as much time as possible to explain why I wasn't able to get it done. And even if it's off the cuff, I'm going to make things up as it goes. That's kind of what they think. They go in there and they just rock it with, like, confidence. Because confidence got them this far. Confidence is going to get them, to the next stage. They're sure of it. They're confident. And I look at these people and I just think to myself, that's one strike. You don't say it. Because confident people don't need to be called out on it directly. Because confident people will deflect confidently as well. So sometimes it can actually be a problem. Now you just think to yourself, okay, that's one strike. That's a silent strike. Then you watch and you see him do it again. Okay, second. Silent strike. After the third time they do it, you got 3 silent strikes. So now you've got the pattern. You've recognized exactly what's going on. You haven't called them on it at all. Right? So they've had if they were going to change, it was going to be of them. Right? This is uninterrupted observation. You're just kind of looking and just seeing, okay, I keep doing this. Yet, you've made a judgment somewhat. It's like a half a judgment. You're pretty sure, you're like 70% sure this person's a slob. But you could be wrong. Right? So you got to figure it out. So, the 4th time comes up. Right? At this point, you have 2 options. You can call them on it. You could have called them on it at any given point. Some people call you out right away. Right? But typically what I found with the slobs is the best thing you can do to kind of get them caught up in a trip is to ask them to explain what it is that they did and what it is that isn't working. Because typically the slob will tell you everything that is working. right? So if they are supposed to get an entire report done and they got the summary done and they got like one chart done and the 25% done the full report, they'll spend the whole time talking about those things that they've done. But they'll never really talk about specifics as to why none of the other sections were, say, written up or what held them up in those sections. So the best thing you can do if you think you've got a slob who is essentially just stretching time for as long as they possibly can before they actually have to deliver something, and usually these people will try to get other people to do the work as well. Indirectly, they'll ask for help from like 10 different people, so they'll get 10 different people to do one little piece of work, and then they'll compile it into like 70% complete, and then they'll do just 30%. So they'll compile and they'll do 30% of the work, and then 70% gets done by like all these other people, but they don't know they're doing anything significant, so they don't even think about it. They just think, oh yeah, I helped him, but I just helped him on that small thing, so I didn't do any of the rest of this. Meanwhile, if everyone spoke up, they said, well, I did that, and 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 suddenly they're like, well, what's the slob done? Oh, the slob did only this and this and this. Oh, I thought you were supposed to do all of this, right? And again, you can be, if you really have a good justification, you can kind of be an asshole and like call slobs out, in my opinion. But the best thing I think to do is just to get them to trip over their own words, because oftentimes, if you're in the position where you're going to fire the person, then you should be calling them out. If it's your job to hire and fire this person, that's on you, right? Don't be playing these weird little games. That's petty. No. These little games are for when you are not the person who is hiring and firing this. Like, they're your coworker. And you're kind of miffed at them because you work hard and they don't. And the less work they seem to do, the more work you seem to have to do. And it's kind of annoying that you're constantly doing work while they're constantly slobbing off. And you don't want to look petty either, right? Because again, maybe you don't know everything, right? Maybe this person is trying their darndest, and life is actually just ruining them right now with bad luck. It could be happening. So I personally don't like to be the petty person. So I just like to challenge them. I like to assume that they're being honest, but now I'm interested in helping this person. I want to know, okay, can you explain what was going on? Because maybe I can help you out here. Maybe we can figure it out now in this discussion in the meeting, so that when you're done, it'll be a faster process. Because sometimes that's all they need, and they literally are just stuck in there, maybe too embarrassed to ask, or they were about to ask, or whatever. And other times, it's because they're slobby, and they just need a kick in the ass. And the way that you can kick them in the ass is constantly making them have to do the work, and showing them how easy it is to do the work in front of the boss. Because then they're gonna, like, because that's the thing, that's the way that the slob works. The slob works purely off of contrast. They want to look as busy as everyone else, right? So if you can't do less work to fix a slob, right? You can't suddenly stop doing work. I mean, again, there are exceptions to the rule, but they're dangerous, and you usually shouldn't do them. My experience is if you just start slacking off because somebody else is slacking off, it doesn't actually fix the problem. It just makes you all look really bad, and you probably all are going to get chewed out, even though it was probably this guy more than not. If anything, that guy might change his tune faster than you because he's an opportunist slob and realizes this is his chance to now look good. I'm serious. Like, keep that in mind. Don't slack off because someone else slacks off and you're going to try and get back at them by not doing work. The way you get back at a slob is you show them how easy it is to do the job they're doing, and how you could do so much more than them, and that you can even help them do that job and still get your regular work done. Because, I mean, you've watched them now for maybe 3 weeks, and you've thought about this problem for 3 weeks, while they've seemed to just do nothing. So that's my my tip for people that are working with slobs, and that applies to the games, because I think the game industry is filled with slobs, corporate slobs, right? Slobs that have no interest in doing the real work, the creative work. They just are interested in getting a paycheck, doing middle managerial work, and pushing the onus onto somebody else. you know? And so if we can resolve that, I think gaming has a chance. If we can't, probably gonna continue to go down the tubes. And yeah. But that's pretty much all I had to say for now. You know, it's a little bit rambly. I think generally speaking though, retro gaming is still a love of mine. And to close this out on a positive note, I just want to think about the joy that the PlayStation 2's game catalog was. It had the biggest game catalog of all time. No console comes close. And when I personally think about how many games I played that were quality on that console, there's at least 100 PS2 titles that I would want to own on my shelf. At least 100. I have, I think, 55 or 60 PS2 titles in my collection, and every single one of them is, in my opinion, quality in some way. They're not all blockbuster games, but they all have heart. Every single one of those games on that shelf, all 55 or 60 of them, whatever it is, all of them are super just passion projects. Like when you play them, you can tell there was some innovation here, there was some vision, and these people wanted to actually make this game fun and meaningful. And like 60 of them, and I don't even, and there's 40 more than I need to at least get. Like 100 titles on one system in the course of what, it was on sale for 10 years, I think. That's like 10 titles a year, bangers, like you don't get that now, right? You're not gonna get that. And a lot of these were exclusives on the PlayStation 2. So when I think of just like how far we've gone, like, I mean, I don't even have the Metal Gear Solid games in my collection on there. And I got 55, 60 bangers. Just amazing games. And I don't have... Let's list the games I don't have there. Let's see. I don't have the Jak and Daxter on there. I don't have Sly Cooper included in that collection. I don't have Metal Gear Solid, as I mentioned. Any of the Metal Gear Solids. I don't have any of the... Or I have one Resident Evil game. But there were so many Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 2 that were good. There were... I mean, then you've got all the fighting games. I have almost no fighting games. There were so many fighting games on the... Wrestling games, if you actually like wrestling, were great on the PlayStation 2 era. There were some really good wrestling games. I'm not even a wrestling fan, and I liked the wrestling games on the PlayStation 2. Then you've got the racing games. I don't think I have any racing games in my collection yet either, because I said I'm missing a lot of games. Like, there's a lot of games I need to get, like probably 40 odd games I need to add to my collection for PlayStation 2 before I'm even mildly content with having everything. The GTA games, I don't have those in my collection. Like, all the games that people really think of on the top of their head, I don't even have those in my collection. And I have bangers, all of them. And all of the ones I just listed are bangers as well. Right? Like, the PlayStation 2, literally, I'm going to go on the record and say there's at least 100 quality games that you should play. At least 100 that you should play. And there was over 3,000 on that system. Now, a lot of those are Japanese. Right? Like, I don't play Japanese games. I mean, I play Japanese games, but I don't play them unless they're translated to English. I've never done any of, like, the imports or anything like that, so I can't speak for those. I've heard lots of good things, but that's a little bit out of my comfort zone. I like North American games. If they're published in North America or Europe, well, North America is just all my collection, so it had to be published in North America for me. So it definitely does limit that. I don't think all 3,000 made it to North America, but it's still a massive number, like 100. Like, I cannot get 100 N64 games I want to play. You know, like, there aren't 100 N64 games that I want to own or play. There aren't 100 Switch games that I want to own or play. There aren't 100 Xbox 360 games that I want to own or play. There aren't 100 Nintendo 60 or GameCube games that I want to play. Although the GameCube actually has a really nice game roster, a lot of exclusives. And again, when I think about the games that came out on the GameCube versus, I mean, the Switch has been doing good, don't get me wrong, but it is way better when you think about, like, the quality of the games that came out and the variability. I don't know, it felt like they were more in sync with the industry as well. Like, the thing that a lot of people criticize the Switch for is that it's a lower power unit, and that even the Switch 2 is going to be maybe a generation behind, right, in terms of power. I mean, for a portable console, that makes sense. They haven't really had a full power console, in my opinion, since, I guess you could say, honestly, since, in my opinion, the GameCube. Because I think the Wii was underpowered compared to the other generation consoles. But again, it came with a uniqueness, so I can give it credit there. But I wasn't a big fan of the Wii. I never was. They had some cool games, but I didn't like the movement mechanics much. But in my opinion, the GameCube was the last real powerhouse console. The Switch, not commercially, but like, the Switch is amazing from an actual, like, sales perspective and units and all that, because it's portable. I mean, like, seriously, it's a portable console. It has a different, I don't know, a different standard, in my opinion, there. But Nintendo seems to have taken a step away from actually having gone full in on, say, a non-handheld, and I think that actually might pay off for them now that the Steam Deck and all of that has kind of come along, because I think there is a lot of room to put higher and higher power into portable consoles. I just think that ultimately the games need to be good, and if you're going with portable, well, you can do online and stuff over Wi-Fi. I think what people liked the most about portable consoles back in the day, like, for me personally and all my friends that I knew growing up that had portable consoles, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, the DS, like, the thing they liked was that they could close it and put it in their pocket and essentially have it on the go. So playing online wasn't a big deal. Obviously, I mean, if you have a quick enough connection, whatever, but anything that gets linked online and focused on the Switch is just not good, in my opinion. I think games on the Switch need to be offline first. That's where I stand on that. So I think if Nintendo is smart enough and they keep going down that route, that might actually just protect them from some of the rot that we've seen in Sony and Microsoft. But they're not immune, that's for sure. Anyways, let's finish this video up with just one, I guess, final thing here. Let's just bring up the screen. And, where are we here? So what I was looking at was the best games on the PS2, and I just kind of wanted to look at Metacritic here and just kind of see, according to Metacritic and the scores, what the top ones are. Because when I was looking at this, I was actually quite surprised, to be honest. Like, I don't think I would have, I don't think I would have ranked them like this, if you know what I mean. At number one, I mean, we have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, all of them. Maybe not 5, but definitely the first 4. But to put this at number 1, really? I disagree. And the reason I disagree is that, in my experience, playing Tony Hawk growing up in the height of its popularity peaked at Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 to 3. And when 3 released, it was a big deal. Like, there was lots of marketing. Everyone was excited about it because it was the first game on the next generation, right? And Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 had refined everything in the first one, but it wasn't much different from the first one, right? So people, when they came to Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, they were excited. At the same time, though, it was a pretty early release, like a really early release in the life cycle of, I think it might have been a near launch, but it was in those first, like, that first year or something. So there was a lot of people that hadn't even bought the console yet, right? Like, there weren't a lot of people at that time to gauge feedback on. And so when I personally think of games, I don't even think of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. It never even comes up in my mind. I think of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 before I think of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, which is strange because it's obviously very high on this list. And it's a good game. But it's not a game that was really that popular. Like, people played Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 as often as people played the BMX game, which I don't even know if it's going to be on this list. It's not on the top 25. There was a bunch of BMX games and a bunch of racing games that kids played just as much as they played Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, because by the time that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 came out, it wasn't novel anymore. The graphics were an upgrade. The idea wasn't that novel. What we hadn't seen yet were some of the other games that the PS2 really started to bring out, like BMX and stuff. Like, those weren't really available on the PlayStation, so those were kind of new. So as a kid growing up who liked all of this stuff, who liked BMXing, who liked skateboarding and all that, this was not actually that popular of a game amongst any of my friends or my peers. I think 2 of my friends, maybe 3 of them, had the game, but they certainly didn't put it on very often. And the only time that I recall ever really playing it was in those early years of the PlayStation 2. Like, the early years. Like, yeah, literally 2001, 2002 maybe. And it never lived beyond that. Grand Theft Auto 3, on the other hand, number 2, that doesn't surprise me at all, because Grand Theft Auto 3 was a game that I remember when I first played it, blew me out of the water. I could not believe that this game existed when it first came out. It was both shocking to me that there was all this kind of violence and this crime and all that in a game, but simultaneously the ability to have an open world to run around and kind of like make your choice to do these missions. It was fantastic. Simple as that. Like, the amount of time I played GTA 3, I never owned it. Played that with my friends and stuff, and man, we played this a lot. Like, we played this a lot, and there was all kinds of gameplay styles that we would play, right? Like, you would play a game by yourself, right? Like, and you usually play the missions, right? Like, my friends who owned it, they all played the missions. They had their character and stuff. But when friends got together, it was just like, it was a loot and shoot. It was like, who can survive the longest? Can you get to 5 stars, right? Like, it was essentially making games out of the chaos. This totally makes sense to me. 100%. Resident Evil 4, huge when it came out. Absolutely huge. People were crazy about this game. Huge fan base. I was not a big Resident Evil fan at the time. I actually became a Resident Evil fan after this with Resident Evil 5, funny enough. So this one kind of skipped me by when it came out. I read about it in the magazines. I followed along with it, but I didn't really know anyone who was a big fan of this until, again, Resident Evil 5 came out. And then I knew some people that went back to Resident Evil 4 and replayed it. But the thing that was big about this was the over-the-shoulder camera. It was just that they'd finally come up with a half-decent mechanic. I think that made this such a big deal, and it really was a it holds up. Like when you put this game in today, it holds up. Very well done game. Not surprised to see it so high. I don't know if I put it number 3. Horror genres, in my opinion, are, I don't know. Like a lot of people really like them, but they've never been my favorite, and I've only ever liked to play them with other people. Like I don't find any joy in soloing horror games. So, not the target demographic, but yeah, it makes sense to me. Metal Gear Solid 2. I'm surprised to see Metal Gear Solid 2 above Metal Gear Solid 3, to be honest. Again, this is where I have to disagree. I think this is more of a fact that it was such an early release. Like when I'm looking, like this to me makes sense. Grand Theft Auto 3 being so high up, even after all those years, that actually does make sense to me. This I think was just because it was an early release. It got inflated scores. I think the same thing for Metal Gear Solid 2. It's a really good game, but when you compare it to Metal Gear Solid 3, it is not a better game. It is not better. So Metal Gear Solid 2, and like if we were having Metal Gear Solid 3 down here, I totally disagree. 10-point difference? No way. Metal Gear Solid 3 is significantly better than Metal Gear Solid 2 from both a narrative perspective, a gameplay perspective, a mechanics perspective in terms of like actual control schemes and stuff like that. Not to mention that Subsistence, when they re-released it, came with a better control scheme as well, in addition to the first release. The graphics are just so much more. There's so much more done. Yeah, no, like Metal Gear Solid 3, hands down, is a better game than Metal Gear Solid 2, and I don't know how many people would disagree with that. The story is interesting. I mean, because you do have essentially the direct kind of continuation there of the Shadow Moses incident. So I think to some degree, people that really like that aspect of Solid Snake will like this. And maybe people were a little turned off by, going back in the past. I don't know. I know a lot of people were also turned off by the fact that half this game is Raiden. So, again, I think this is overly inflated based on critics being primarily there, being such an early release title, and not a ton of exposure. I think this has just been more like a baked in since the beginning kind of score. So I would not hold it to that standard. The next two, again, GTA, doesn't surprise me. Gran Turismo 3 doesn't surprise me either, because almost everyone had this game, and this game, unlike Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, actually did get played for quite a long time, mostly due to the fact that Gran Turismo 4 took so long to release, that people played this game because of sheerly nothing else to substitute it with. That was at least as realistic as this was for the time. So this was by far the most realistic racing simulator at the time, and until Gran Turismo 4 came out, there was no option. So yeah, if you're into racing, yes, you play Gran Turismo 3. I played it a ton. I put a lot of hours into Gran Turismo 3. And I wasn't even, again, a big racing fan, but I put a ton of hours into this. Actually, Gran Turismo 3 made me a car fan. I didn't like cars until I started playing Gran Turismo 3, and then I suddenly liked cars. So, I will say this, excellent game, makes total sense why it's up here. Madden, never been a sports person. I'm going to ignore every Madden, every sports game. Doesn't matter to me. I know nothing about them. I know some are better than others. That's about it. Pro Skater 4, again, I don't know why it's so high up. Like, yeah, people played it, but they didn't play it that much. Again, I remember there was a lot of media hype, so that's probably where it came from. But yeah, no. This to me feels a little fudgy. God of War, though, that makes total sense to me. When this game came out, it blew my mind. This was a game. This game was just badass. As simple as that. I was the right age when this came out, that this was like the coolest thing ever. It was just so cool to be Kratos, to be a badass. I was just like, this is manliness in gaming form. And yeah, for a teenager, this was what I needed in my life. I remember playing this with my friend and loving every minute of it. And my mom wouldn't let me play it, so I would sneak it in and hide it in my room, and I would play it at night. And yeah, I loved this game. Virtual Fighter 4, yeah, I guess you could put Virtual Fighter 4. That there's a few fighting games that I think, like, I don't know, for fighting like this, yeah, probably Virtual Fighter 4. But I don't know. I would also put Soul Calibur 2 a little bit higher up here. I don't like seeing two Virtual Fighter, especially not like another Virtual Fighter 4 version thing. Yeah. See, again, I think this is probably just a factor of them being the first fighting games released, really on the title, on the system, and just getting really high reviews because of that fact, and less because of their extremely good, performance and stuff. Like, I think games where you see something like 2005 coming up higher, just like God of War 2 here, and even Burnout 3, these to me, and like Metal Gear Solid, those are high signal to me. Like, I actually do see that as value, and I recognize these are all good games. Even Okami was a really good game, very artsy when it came out, and it came out near the end of the reign. So to get a high score like this, while it was definitely inflated a bit because of its art style, its gameplay was also unique, but it certainly, in my opinion, it had some areas that could be improved, and some things that were not quite as exciting as they were on paper. At the same time, oh, there's Soul Calibur 2. Yeah, up there is pretty good. It's a good game. The SSX Tricky, we saw some on the past page there. Yeah, they were fun. This was one of my favorites, to be honest. I liked SSX Tricky more than I liked the other ones, because it had good music, it was fun, great game. Prince of Persia, excellent game. Final Fantasy 12. I don't think I would put 12 above 10. I don't think anyone would put 12 above 10. I don't know, like, if anything, this is almost like a reverse, where it's like, maybe they feel that they overinflated Final Fantasy X, so they wanted to compensate. I don't know, but to me, Final Fantasy X is clearly better than Final Fantasy 12. Even if it's just 1 point. Like, if we're gonna give this a 92 for 10, then this has to be a 91 in my opinion. But again, but yeah, I would just reverse these. 10 is clearly better than 12. It has a better fan base, and generally speaking, the gameplay was better received at the time of launch, and is aged better as well, in my opinion. Although, people have come to appreciate 12. And with the latest remasters of it, I think that's the way to play it. But both games are great. Prince of Persia is a great game too. Guitar Hero 2, classic. I don't have these either. I need to get these. Classics. Never played Klonoa 2. I'm surprised to see something so high up here, especially considering I never played it or heard about it. So I'm going to say that this is kind of inflated because, one, I've never heard of it, and it came out essentially at launch. So yeah, I'm just gonna say overly inflated launch title, not actually that special. Twisted Metal Black was a departure for a slightly darker take. I mean, it's always a dark series, but it kind of always floated between unsure of whether it wanted to be humorous or dark. And with Twisted Metal, they chose dark. But yeah, this game has been liked since it was released, and it's never really, it didn't really get supplanted, but it was also an early title, so I don't know if it's a 91 per se, but it's definitely a good game. All of these are good. Dead on Arrival 2, maybe it's Dead or Alive 2, I always forget. Excellent game. This is actually a good fighting game, in my opinion. I didn't realize it was such an early release. So, wow. But this game was excellent. It also had some interesting cheat codes and stuff. Again, another Tony Hawk's Underground. Okay, this one I remember when they released, but still. NBA Street, I remember that was a fun game. Ratchet and Clank, just classic. Jack and Daxter. See, why is it so far down here? Like Klonoa 2? I've never even heard of that. And they're putting Jack and Daxter down at 51? No. Jack and Daxter is better than whatever Klonoa 2 is. And then all of these are good games. Dragon Quest 8's good, Rayman's good, Splinter Cell. I mean, I still remember when I first played that, and I just got addicted to spy stuff when this game came out. It was so cool, and it came out at such a good time too. In like terms of like the zeitgeist of the minds of people. Like Tom Clancy is, I think, these days almost like it's almost fallen out of favor. But back when I was a kid, I remember like you would see Tom Clancy on a game and you just knew that it was going to be a cool military game, right? Like that was always the draw for Tom Clancy branding. And they had so many PC games at the time, a lot of shooters, a lot of sniper games, a lot of little like squad combat games. But whenever they came onto the console, there were always less of them. It always felt like a slightly different take because you didn't quite have the PC power behind you. But when Splinter Cell came out, it felt like this was designed for a console. Whereas all the other Tom Clancy games, pretty much up to this point in my mind, were always felt like they were designed for a PC, right? A lot of those early first-person shooter games, even on the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, they were kind of clunky. You didn't have quite the smooth movement, right? The reticule and the scopes were always kind of limited. And while they were fun, and I spent a lot of time playing like SOCOM and Spec Ops and stuff, like, so I definitely played those games. But yeah, when Splinter Cell came out, this was like something completely different. The stealth style, the lighting, the sound, all of that. They redefined the kind of military genre that was available, and I have been such a fan of it. And I was sad to see what happened after, essentially, the PlayStation 2 generation. This generation, Splinter Cell was amazing. I liked all of them. But yeah, no, I think it was just excellent. And like there was so much going on in the world stage too. You had all sorts of things happening, like you know, military uprisings. You had the terrorist attacks. You had the war in Iraq. You had all sorts of things. It felt like a good time to have that kind of military story told. Man, there's so many sports things. I just don't get it. Like the sports games never. I mean, the basketball ones are pretty fun, like the street games. But all of the others, like the actual like team ones, I just don't. No, I'm surprised I haven't seen like a single wrestling game on here. But there's like 1,000 football games. Good. Those are all good. Red Faction was fun when it came out, but again, to me, this is a game that it certainly had like the geomodding in it was very unique, and actually to this day it's quite unique. But again, this was a game that, in my opinion, was a good game, but I don't know if I put it in the top 100. Maybe in the top 100, but certainly not 80. Maybe down in the 90s. But it's not a bad game. You know, yeah, Ratchet and Clank, fantastic. Tekken 5, that was good. All of the Sly games are fantastic. Baldur's Gate, like this is better than Red Faction. I don't know what anyone's talking about. Baldur's Gate, Dark Alliance is fantastic, and so is Dark Alliance 2. SOCOM 2 was fun. Yeah, these are all good. All of these are good. Bully was great. Like, yeah, Bully should be above Red Faction. Again, this is where you get this bias from early games. Early games were overly inflated because they didn't have much to compare with except for older generations, right? And so when you're comparing Red Faction to something like, Duke Nukem, well, yeah, Red Faction is going to look pretty amazing. But it was leaps and bounds in terms of performance difference. But yeah, Kingdom Hearts number 99, really? Really? Yeah, Metacritic doesn't know what it's talking about. If I'm going to give anybody advice, number 1, select everything but sports. Number 2, Metascore, and maybe move the scale up to 2003. Because if you move the score up to 2003 onward, you'll skip all those first 2 years where things were overly inflated. Then look at those years individually. But I would honestly look at the games 2003 and onwards, because I think that's when one, developers got quite comfortable. Series started to develop. So while a lot of series were started in that first 1 or 2 years, by 2003, a lot of games were beginning to get their sequels and actually develop into what we would come to know as their actual final form. But yeah, like, there's so many games. Like, I mean, even Psychonauts I would put up a lot higher than here. But a lot of these games are way too far down in the list. Like, we haven't even got to, Beautiful Joe 2 and Kingdom Hearts down here. Yeah, no. All of these have to be way higher. Simple as that. This list is completely bonkers. You can't trust people that play sports games. They are literally untrustworthy, and any critic of a sports game is worse. They don't know nothing. You can't trust nothing on sports. They ruin everything. So yeah, you gotta look at top 100 games on a PlayStation 2 without a single sports game, and you will get nothing but bangers. I guarantee you, for the first 100. There'll be just nothing but bangers. But this, I don't know. All these sports games, crazy. Anyways, I think I'll end it here. Appreciate you guys checking in on the stream. And, I guess, take it easy, If anyone can suggest games that they didn't see on that list, or maybe games I might have overlooked, that you really enjoyed, drop a comment below. It'd be great if you could like and subscribe. I highly doubt anyone will. That's what at least all the content creators tell me, that nobody does. And, I mean, I don't even have viewers, so how are you going to get subscribers without viewers, right? But yeah, like, subscribe, all that jazz, and follow me along for future episodes. I'll try to, come with a little bit more to the table as this kind of proceeds. I'll get a little bit better, going off the cuff, get some content lined up, and like I said, also keep your eye open for my devlog as I'm working on the game. Anyways, thanks everybody, and take care.